Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janabalaba Girdhari Gopi Janabalaba Girdhari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatiya Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Shabam Sabharaj Gachai Sto Dersatasi Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Shabam Sabharaj Gachai Sto Dersatasi Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Go Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, chapter 10. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Text 29. Aditsur anapananam asan kuksyantra nadaya Naja samudras tayos Tushti pushtis tarasraye Aditso annapananam Asan kukshantra nadaya Naja samudras tayos Tushti pushtis tarasraye Aditso annapananam Asan kuksyantra nadaya Nadra samudras chatayos Tushti pushtis tarasraye Aditso, desiring to have, anapananam, of food and drink. Asan, there became. Kukshi, the abdomen. Antra, the intestines. Nadaya, and the arteries. Naja, the rivers. Samudra, seas. Cha, also. Tayo, of them. Tushti, sustenance. Pushti, metabolism. Tat, of them. Asraye, the source. Translation: when there was a desire to have food and drink, the abdomen and the intestines and also the arteries became manifested. The rivers and seas are the source of their sustenance and metabolism. Purport. The controlling deities of the intestines are the rivers, and those of the arteries, the seas. Fulfillment of the belly with food and drink is the cause of sustenance, and the metabolism of the food and drink replaces the waste of the bodily energies. Therefore, the body's health is dependent on healthy actions of the intestines and the arteries. The rivers and the seas, being the controlling deities of the two, keep the intestines and the arteries in healthy order. Translation again. When there was a desire to have food and drink, the abdomen and the intestines, and also the arteries, became manifested. The rivers and seas are the source of their sustenance and metabolism. Om Agana Chimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militan Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The past few days we have been hearing about the Vishvarupa, the universal form of the Lord, and perhaps it's a good idea to let's just try to get an overview on this whole phenomenon of the Vishvarupa, the universal form. You may recall earlier in the second canto where the Vishvarupa is introduced as a meditation for those who are not so fortunate as to be inclined to focus on the personal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they're given an option, the Vishvarupa, which is a material manifestation and a material visualization, both at the same time. As we explained a few days ago, the universal form is a construct, authorized construct given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead for, as we said, those who have some aversion or lack of interest in the personal form of the Lord. So what can they relate to? What can such people relate to? They look at the mountains, the seas, the planets, the sun, and they recognize their own insignificance in the face of the cosmic creation, and so therefore they are allowed to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the cosmic form. It's an authorized construct. You could even say an authorized fiction, a fiction authorized by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so much so that, as we explained the other day, the Supreme Personality of Godhead can appear as that fiction. This is how inconceivable the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. He gives you a fiction. All right, you don't want to meditate on my form. You can't appreciate name, form, quality, and pastimes. So here, what you can appreciate is the cosmos, the universe, the natural world around you. Fix your mind on that. I'll allow you to do that. And what's more, I can appear as that fiction, and the fiction becomes real. So this is why we sometimes get a little confused reading about the universal form. Well, is it or is it not? Just like in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks to see the universal form. And Krishna tells him, you need special eyes to see that because you're a pure devotee. You don't need such a vision of you don't need a vision of such a construct. You don't need the fiction, but I can make the fiction real for you. Watch this. And of course, Arjuna sees the universal form in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and quickly he asked Krishna, this is not how I relate to you. Please, let's resume our personal relationship. And so Krishna goes to his four-handed and then his two-handed form, and Arjuna is more peaceful. Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam are very interrelated. So, in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says the definition of a Mahatma, not a politician Mahatma, but an actual established devotee. Mahatmanas tumam partha daivim prakritim ashrita. The genuinely great soul, Mahatma, is always absorbed in my daivi prakriti, my internal potency. And what are the symptoms of that absorption in the internal potency of the Lord? Satatam kirtayanto mam, the next verse. Oh, such a person is always chanting my glories, always engaged in devotional service, always bowing down before me. Now, sometimes we think in the beginning stages of bhakti, and maybe even a little later, if we're not very strong in our scientific understanding of bhakti, we think, well, is this the only way? You'd be surprised that in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna points out other ways. And so right after he talks about a Mahatma and the symptoms of a Mahatma, Krishna says, well, there are others. Jnana yagena chapyanye yajato mam upasate ekatvena prataktvena bahuda vishvato mukam. Besides the Mahatmas who are situated in my internal potency, there are others who consider themselves one with the Supreme, so they meditate on themselves. They consider themselves one with in more contemporary terms, they consider themselves one with the cosmos, one with the cosmic energy. Ekaptvena, the oneness. Prataktvena, bahuda. Then there are others who say everything is God. So many gods. They're demigods, here's a God, there's a God, everywhere there's a God. Kind of like some kind of pantheism. And Bahuda Vishvato Mukam. Finally, there are those who worship the Vishvarupa, the universal form. So Krishna is flexible. There are other things you can do besides being a Mahatma. But the problem is they don't work in this day and age. So you not only hear Harinam, Harinam, Harinam Eva Kevalam. There's only one way in the age of Kali, that is chanting the holy name. But you also hear about the other approaches. It's just that they don't work either directly or indirectly. So you may recall in the beginning of the second canto, Shukadeva Goswami explains to Parikshit Maharaj about the Vishvarupa for those who have a problem with Krishna's personal form. And after Shukadeva Goswami explains about the Vishvarupa, the universal form, meditation, he then explains about Paramatma meditation, Lord in the heart, which is the next step up. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes that there are different ways that you can approach a higher level through the universal form worship, through focusing on the Vishvarupa. But first he talks about a path that goes nowhere. It's totally out of it. And this path is very popular today. Meditating on your own prana or your own mind. And that's it. Considering your mind to be what you should focus on, the movements of your mind, mindfulness and doing some kind of yogic meditation just on the airs within, that gets you nowhere, according to the Acharyas, because there's no connection to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You're basically being an atheist. You're basically being a materialist, because the prana is material, the life energy is material, and the mind is material. So you're being so mindful, but you're going nowhere in terms of transcendence. So the next step up, though, is focusing on the universal form as a conduit to higher levels of realization. One of them being to focus on the four-handed form of the Lord in the heart. You can, from the Vishvarup, the universal form meditation, you can then take a step to that. But more fortunate, the Acharya says, are those who don't need the universal form focus. They don't need to take that step. They can go directly to Paramatma realization. And of course, those who take directly to bhakti, they get everything. Brahman, Paramatma, and the last word, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They get that directly. So we're on the express train, and it's sometimes easy to forget that because we're living in the most desperate and degraded age. So it's kind of inconceivable to us how during such darkness there is the greatest opportunity to go directly to Krishna. And then we have to, of course, start thinking about the magnanimity of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who in the midst of Kali Yuga makes the highest levels of bhakti attainable. In the worst possible times, you get the best of all things. So sometimes people become angry that if they're, the problem of evil, the classic problem that philosophers have been struggling with for hundreds of years. If there's a God, why are people suffering? Why are people dying? Why is there so much hypocrisy and illusion in the world? But just see, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has appeared, and he's giving away the taste of bhakti even to persons who know nothing. I remember sitting in front of Srila Prabhupada in Atlanta, and he had begun his lecture by singing not Jai Radha Madhava, but Parama Karuna Pahundwijana. These two lords, Chaitanya, Nityananda, extremely merciful, the essence of all incarnations, Sabha Avatar, Sar Shiromani, Kevala Ananda Kanda. And what's the path they're advocating? Pure Ananda, pure bliss. So he was singing that, and in Atlanta at the time, the only deities were big brass Gaur-Nitai deities. And so Prabhupada would begin his class chanting Parama Karuna. So I was sitting right in front of him, and he began his lecture after chanting Parama Karuna. The lecture only lasted a minute and a half. It was Prabhupada's shortest lecture. He started talking about Lord Chaitanya, how he is so merciful. He's giving the taste of love of Krishna to persons who know nothing about Krishna. How can you taste love of someone you don't know? But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu does this gives this inconceivable gift of a taste of love of someone you have no idea, but you get the taste. And so he continued saying, just take shelter of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and be happy. And his voice started to crack. And sitting in front of him, I saw just the tears shot from his eyes like coming from a syringe. And then Prabhupada got off the Vyasa after just a minute and a half and left, went to his room, and wouldn't talk at all about what happened. So those are the symptoms. Those are the physical symptoms of someone in ecstatic love. But such a person, truly in ecstatic love, doesn't like broadcasting such an incident of being overwhelmed with ecstatic love for Krishna. So Prabhupada didn't talk about it. Not like some kind of phony who artificially tries to show ecstatic symptoms. Sometimes in India you see that. You're in the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan, and a sahajya, someone who shows everything very cheaply, comes into the temple room in front of the deities and starts rolling on the floor. In other words, just see. Just see my response to the deities. I'm rolling on the floor. I must be a great devotee, and you should respect me as such. But the real ecstatic devotees don't like showing their internal state. They rather show you how they're always engaged in devotional service. So Lord Chaitanya resolves the whole problem of why there is evil in the world, why there is suffering. Because in spite of all that, he's giving away the greatest thing. Therefore, Bhagavatam says, saints and sages actually worship Kali Yuga. So here, Western philosophers especially are scratching their heads. Western theologians, why is there suffering? Why, if there's a God, how can he allow evil? And then, what is actually happening? In the 11th canto, the verse is there that great saints and sages worship this most problematic time because you can achieve the perfection of life so easily just by chanting Hare Krishna. So there are other ways to make gradual progress. It's just they don't work these days. Life is too short. The mind is too agitated. Society is too distracting. But just for the record, Bhagavatam is showing you that here's the Vishwarup meditation. You can see the whole universe as the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But it doesn't end there. Just like you'll see some contemporary remnant of universal form worship in the indigenous traditions of the world, and even modern industrialized persons in their consumer societies sometimes become so disgusted. We're disconnected from nature. We need to get back with nature, and the best way to do that is to see all of nature as divine, but it ends there. In other words, if you're actually going to do anything resembling Vishwarup meditation, universal form meditation, you just don't say, oh, the mountains are the bones of the Lord and the oceans are this and that. You have to engage in service. Otherwise, you go nowhere. So this is what's missing. If you simply appreciate nature, but don't know how to engage all of nature in Krishna's service, you don't make any spiritual advancement. So therefore, so much today of what goes on in terms of new eco-philosophy, reconnecting humans with nature, realizing that humans are just one of the many species on this planet, and we shouldn't suffer from speciesism, considering the human species to be superior. Just like there's racism, well, now there's speciesism. That human beings have the notion that they are the crown of creation, the crestule of creation, and they can do whatever they like on this planet and ignore all the other species. We shouldn't think that way. We should realize that humans, amidst so many other species, they're all equal. No, the human being has a special opportunity to realize how everything is connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore everything should be used in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without service, everything is flat. Everything is like a flat tire. You're trying to drive a car, and all the tires are flat. So after you develop some mental peace and clarity by worshiping the universal form, as the Bhagavatam presents, your next step, as the second canto describes, is Paramatma worship, the four-handed form of the Lord in your heart. That's a step up. So these are other ways, but it's just that in the age of Kali, this present age of darkness, you don't have the time, you don't have the peaceful setting in order to pursue these other ways. You have a chance to take the express train. Just like if you're going from one destination to another, if you want to fly from the Gold Coast to Sydney, do you get a flight that first goes out to Ayers Rock and then comes back into Sydney? No, you want nonstop. Similarly, we want the quickest way to achieve the ultimate destination. And therefore, we bypass even a beginning of Paramatma realization, the Lord in the heart. What to speak of bypassing universal form? And we go right to bhakti based on hearing and chanting about Krishna and engaging in Krishna's service. We can consider various aspects of Krishna interacting with his various energies. And there are different conceptions about that. Some are false and some are correct. Some say, as they artificially imagine themselves to be advanced devotees, why do we have to hear about Krishna dealing with his external energy, Maya? We are so advanced, we only hear about Krishna with the gopis. We only hear about Krishna lifting Govardhan Hill. That's the hallmark of an advanced devotee. We don't hear about Krishna in terms of the Purusha avatars, Mahavishnu, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, Tirodakashaya Vishnu, the affairs of creating, maintaining, and destroying. We don't touch that. That's for the neophytes. So, in his purports, Srila Prabhupada always criticizes such a notion. He points out that actually everything is Leela for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything is a pastime, whether dancing with the gopis or expanding as Mahavishnu and breathing out the universes. This is all Leela. It has nothing to do with force. It has nothing to do with being touched by the material energy. There's no material cause. There's no material influence incurred by the Supreme Lord. So if you are truly an advanced devotee, you see everything that Krishna does as his pastime, not just his holding up Govardhan Hill. I remember once at the BBT, Prabhupada wrote a letter during the time his books were being produced. And he said, he looked at the pictures in his books, and he said, who is filling my books with only pictures of Krishna dancing with the gopis? Because the artists and the BBT were thinking, well, that's the highest, and it's very artistic. Krishna dancing with his consorts, yeah, we'll fill up the books with the highest. And the Prabhupada complained, who's doing this? Why are you putting in my books just pictures of Krishna dancing with the gopis? We want to see how Krishna controls everything. So he's teaching you what a real pure devotee is, not someone artificially presenting themselves as advanced. Oh, in our assembly we only talk about Krishna and the gopis. We don't touch these lower topics. Jiva Goswami was a lower devotee. He wrote so much philosophy of bhakti, but we just want to hear the leelas. No, we don't accept that. Because actually, for a beginning devotee, it is essential to hear about how the Supreme Personality of Godhead interacts with the material energy without being affected. It's essential. You're in the body consciousness. You're trying to get out of body consciousness. You're immersed in the world of Maya. You need to hear how that world of Maya is Krishna's energy under his control. You can't just flick it off because, remember, the superintendent of the material energy, Maya Devi herself, Durga, is a devotee of Krishna. So therefore, you can't just say the material world has no connection to the Supreme and we don't want to hear about it, or the connection to the Supreme is not worthy of our meditation. You can't say that. Unless you're a very neophyte or ill-motivated person pretending to be a devotee. So again and again, Prabhupada makes the point that a real devotee relishes everything Krishna does. And that the sections of Bhagavatam describing how the Lord interacts with the various energies, his various creative aspects, that is especially mercy for the neophytes. They can focus on the material energy more easily. And then they can gradually make advancement to the state where they can appreciate Krishna has his internal potency. Otherwise, in the beginning, what do you think when you hear about Krishna dancing with the gopis, Krishna playing with the cowherd boys? Well, I know. You think, I know what that's all about. Yeah, I do the same thing. So you confuse, consciously or unconsciously, you confuse Krishna's activities of internal potency, internal affairs, with your own affairs. So therefore, it's especially important to understand the information given in the Bhagavatam about how Krishna wields his material energy via the Purusha avatars. In one purport, in the second canto, Prabhupada talks about how some so-called devotees have asked me to immediately give them the 10th canto. But in so many words he said, I refuse to do that because Bhagavatam is systematic. First, you appreciate how the Supreme Personality of Godhead controls everything, and then you're ready for the 10th canto, the smiling face of the Lord. Of course, we were given the Krishna book, which is a summary study of the 10th canto, because Srila Prabhupada was thinking, if he's not in this world long enough to finish the 10th canto, the devotees all have the Krishna book, which is a summary study. So you might say, well, aha, just see. We did get the 10th canto straight away. The Krishna book came out when basically the devotees back then just had a few cantos of Bhagavatam. One or two cantos, that's it. And then you had the Krishna book, the summary study of the 10th canto. So what happens? In the Krishna book, you find Leela pastimes embedded in tattva. scientific understanding. This is the glory of the Krishna book. An inconceivable job of combining the two so that anyone in their right state of mind will not make offense and just think Krishna's pastimes are material. It's not simply that the Leela, the pastimes are given. You're given the scientific understanding. This is the glory of the Krishna book. And sometimes Prabhupada would say that's his favorite book. Not to, of course, say the others are of lesser value, but in terms of when he was relaxing, he would like to have persons read the Krishna book to him. And he would say, I didn't write this. I didn't write this book. Krishna has spoken it. So the universal form worship has its place. And yes, there are other ways. But why, when you're trying to fly to Sydney from the Gold Coast, why do you first go way out, take a flight to Perth, change planes, and fly back into Sydney? It makes no sense. You want the direct flight. You've got things to do in Sydney. You don't want a flight that does a stop in Perth or Adelaide and then comes all the way back to Sydney. Even if you might save a little money, you still don't want to do it. It's too far out of your way. So the Bhagavatam is giving you the whole scenario. And then it tells you, by the way, in the age of Kali, all this is too far out of your way. It's not going to work out for you. So in this way, I hope you can see the Visvarupa meditation in perspective. It has value. And in fact, earlier in the second canto, when the universal form is being discussed by Shukadeva Goswami, we learned that there would be so much benefit for humanity if they would adopt this technique of seeing the cosmos as the universal body of the Lord. There would be peace, there would be tranquility. So you might say, well, okay, let's do it. But the problem is, in this age of Kali, you need stronger medicine. If they could do it, there would be that preliminary spiritual effect. But they can't do it. Especially since whenever someone wants to consider the universe as the body of the Lord, there's no service. Yes, the universe is the body of the Lord. Now, where's my stuff? Everything belongs to me. How am I going to fulfill my desires? This is not going to work. So we've heard how for someone who's actually an exalted devotee, they see everything as Krishna's pastimes. They don't make an artificial distinction between the Lord lifting up Govardhan Hill and the Lord expanding as Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and so on. Still, their natural attraction is to hear about Krishna's personal pastimes. So Bhagavatam is deep. It kind of requires some maturity in our understanding, because otherwise it sounds like double talk. Well, on the one hand, they don't see a difference. On the other hand, they're inclined more to hear about Krishna in Vrindavan. Well, let's consider, as we get near the end of this chapter, what's going to happen. Remember, Shukadeva Goswami has explained Bhagavatam to Pritchett. And now in the audience with the sages at Naimisharanya, they're hearing from Sutta Goswami, who's relaying what Shukadeva told Pritchett. They're hearing from Sutta. So the Bhagavatam is nested dialogues within dialogues. So the sages at Naimisharanya are saying, in effect, you'll find at the end of the chapter, I think we've heard enough about the Lord's external affairs. I think we got the point. What about Vidur and what happened between Vidura and Maitreya? Remember? Back in the first canto, you talked about how Vidura was literally ejected from the palace of the Kauravas and went on pilgrimage. We'd like to hear what Vidura went through and his experiences, his journey, his spiritual journey. We'd like to hear that. So yes, both the verse and Prabhupada's purport make that point. The sages at Naimisaranya, headed by Shonakari, she said, we had enough of the Vishwarupa. Can we turn the page on that one? So this is Srimad Bhagavatam. It is a rasa shastra. There's the flavor of rasa, spiritual flavor, spiritual taste throughout Srimad Bhagavatam. All right, I think we'll stop there and ask if you have any questions. Yes?
Me?
Sure.
Thank you, Devamrita Maharaj, for the class this morning.
Thank you for coming.
Appreciate it. Thank you. I was just wondering about you were talking about the material nature and also about Krishna's pastimes and how, and I was understanding what you were saying. But what I'm trying to ask is, even though we hear about the pastimes of Krishna in the Krishna book, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, etc., can we also see, like, for example, a personal experience in our own lives as a pastime of Krishna? Like something might happen to us and then we say, oh, that's Krishna's mercy. And also, I was also wondering about the material nature and how...
Let me answer the first one.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yes, devotees can be very casual and fancy-free about saying something is Krishna's mercy or Krishna's arrangement. One has to be very hesitant about that and think about it deeply, discuss with some seniors. Otherwise, you're sitting outside and someone walks by you with a big tray of pizza prasad, and what do you say?
Let's eat it.
Krishna's arrangement. But what happens when you get to the prasad area and there's no more prasad left, everyone's taken all the pizza prasad, what do you say?
You get disappointed.
You get angry. It's not Krishna's arrangement. So we're very selective in the beginning stages of bhakti about what we call Krishna's arrangement. If you're wanting to get married and certain person walks by you and drops something on the ground and you pick it up, here it is. That's Krishna's arrangement, right? Because it's what you want. Therefore, Krishna must want it because it's what I want. Better to hear from those who have a mature understanding of bhakti before we so quickly call something Krishna's arrangement, because often it's just our arrangement, our desires manifesting. Anything else? Yes.
I just wondered, is that why Radharani, Srimati Radharani's name is not mentioned in the Bhagavatam or mentioned inadvertently because we're supposed to approach the Lord from his feet at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, and it's such that we will put our own experience. So is it protecting Radharani that she's not mentioned, is my question.
That's Srimati Radharani is top drawer confidential. And so it's not that Sukadeva Goswami mentions her inadvertently. He mentions her very carefully in a partially covered way. Yes, because it's very personal, Krishna's most personal business, just like you don't want your most personal business just casually discussed in public. So Shukadeva Goswami is protecting Krishna's most personal affairs. And another reason is the Acharyas say that Shukadeva Goswami mentioned her name in a covered way because if he blurted out her name, he'd be lost in ecstasy and the Bhagavatam wouldn't finish. Anything else? Yes?
So just to add to that question, how do you, as a senior, differentiate between the two? Like, what's Krishna's arrangement and what isn't?
Take some knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam and also often some consultation with someone more experienced in bhakti. And of course, if you stick to the bhakti path, you'll make spiritual advancement and you'll develop spiritual intelligence. But in the beginning stages of bhakti, just to go around saying, Krishna's arrangement, Krishna's arrangement. We need to outgrow that stage and develop a mature understanding. And then we develop an ability because Krishna is in everyone's heart. And you don't hear older devotees. You don't hear Ramai Swami just going around, oh, that's Krishna's arrangement, that's Krishna's arrangement. It's very careful. You think about it and you develop some expertise as time passes in your bhakti development.
So you would basically, based on Bhagavatam, kind of get stable through whatever you think that's Krishna's arrangement into reading the Bhagavatam and taking...
Take a step back before you make that declaration. Let's say if someone wanted to make you happy and they decide the way to do that is to find out where you live, and if there's a pavement in front of your house, maybe there's not because you live here at New Govardhana, I don't know. But if there's a pavement in front of your house and the person says, I'm going to paint the pavement purple in front of your house, that'll make you so happy. It's Krishna's arrangement. What would you say? And you would say, well, if you really want to know what is an arrangement that would please me, why don't you ask me? So as you progress in bhakti, you develop the ability to want to do what Krishna wants and want to give Krishna. You want to do what gives Krishna pleasure, rather than just, oh, it's Krishna's arrangement. Krishna wants this. This is all part of advancement in bhakti. And you will develop that ability if you stick to it. And Krishna says that besides the instructions he gives in Bhagavad Gita, he will give you customized personal instruction. Tesham sasatayuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. For those who are constantly serving me with affection, with priti, I'll give you customized personal instruction how to come to me. So you got it from Bhagavad Gita, and then Krishna says, on top of that, I'll talk to you personally. All right. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda.